Good day, Deep in Word family. Welcome to day 311 of our Bible study review. Today we're going through the chapters 19 through 21 of the Gospel according to Luke. Now let's remember where we left off yesterday because our Messiah is walking through Jericho. And in that time, he was healing a man who was blind. He heard that the Messiah was coming. He heard the crowd, so he knew what was going on. And then it says that his faith is what saved him. His faith is what made him whole. Now, if he wasn't persistent, right, on calling out on the name above all names, then he would not have received what he needed. Let that speak to you, all right? So now our Messiah is getting closer and closer to Jerusalem. And how does it open up in chapter 19? There's a man named Zacchaeus, and he is a short man of stature. And so he doesn't see the Messiah coming, but he knows he's coming because of the crowds. And so he is a tax collector, and he gets up in a tall sycamore tree because he wants to see the Messiah with his own eyes. Let's pick up in verse 5 and see how this reads. It says, when Yeshua came to the vicinity, he looked up and saw him and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must remain at your house. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. When they saw it, the other people, that is, they all murmured, saying, he has gone to be with the guest of a man who is a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, he says, look, Adon, I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have taken anything from anyone falsely, right, he says, I will repay him 4 times as much. Yeshua said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. Now keep that in mind, because all of the people are still watching and listening to the words of our Messiah. As we continue reading in verse 11, now he starts to talk of a parable. But let's pick up. It says, as they heard these things, he continued and told them a parable, because he was near Jerusalem and because they thought that the kingdom of Elohim would immediately appear. You need to circle that, highlight that, because that is the reason why many fell away and did not believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. And that is the reason why many still don't believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, because they thought at that moment in time that he was going to kick off the millennial reign right then and there. And because it didn't happen the way that they thought it would happen, they fell away. They fell away from their own Messiah. Keep that in mind as we continue reading, because we have read of this parable before, but this one reads a little bit different, and there's more detail in the gospel account of Luke than there is in the other gospel account recorded in Matthew. So let's read. Picking up in verse 12, it says, therefore he said, a nobleman went to a distant country to receive a kingdom and to return. All right, so he's talking about himself. So he called his 10 servants and entrusted to them 10 pounds and said to them, trade until I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. Understand that in this story, the servants are supposed to be the children of Israel, okay? And they rejected their own Messiah. They did not want him, the one who was spoken of about in the scriptures. They didn't want him to rule over them. So they sent a delegation saying, we don't want this man to rule over us. All right. So you had some who believed, obviously. That's why we have the back of the book recorded. But the majority rejected their Messiah. So in the Gospel of Matthew, this is recorded as the parable of talents. But here it tells you that this is 10 pounds. All right. This is money that is dispersed amongst his servants. Now, 2 of them went out, and these are the ones who did well. They brought a double portion back to this man who went to receive the kingdom in return, okay? Obviously, this is the Messiah, all right? But let's read about the 3rd one, okay? It says, then another came to me saying, Master, look, here is your pound, right? Because he received 1 talent, if you're comparing this to Matthew. So he received 1 pound, all right? And he says, here it is, I give it back to you. He says, which I have kept and put away in a napkin, for I feared you, because you are an exacting man. You collect what you did not deposit. This is what the servant is saying to the master, saying that you're exacting and you collect what you yourself did not deposit. All right. And it says you reap what you did not sow. The nerve. The nerve. All right. And so the master says to him, out of your own mouth I will judge you, you wicked servant. You knew that I was an exacting man, collecting what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow. Why then did you not deposit my money? Mine, right? Because everything in the earth was made by him, right? Nothing could have been if it wasn't coming through him, right? That's what the scriptures say. So he says, you should have took my money and put it in the bank so that at my coming, I might have collected it with interest. Now you can look at this on a spiritual note because our Messiah is the one who came to bring the deposit, the Spirit, right? The Spirit is the down payment on the house until he comes and brings the fullness of salvation and changes our bodies into an incorruptible body just like his. All right. So that's on a spiritual note. That's how you can look at this thing right here. But the people that he is addressing is his own, right? The natural seed of Abraham, right? The branches, Israel, natural born Israel is who he was speaking about, right? But not everybody wanted him to be their king. They rejected him. Please keep all of this in mind as we're reading through all of today's reading material. Keep that in the forefront of your mind. Now it gives the account of his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. All right, we've read of some of these things before, and I'm going to pick up in verse 39 and touch on some things. As our Messiah is walking, right? He's riding the donkey into Jerusalem, and people are literally throwing branches into the highway, and they are worshiping Elohim, and they are saying, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh, peace in heaven and glory in the highest, right? So let's pick up in verse 39. Some of the Pharisees from the crowd said to the Messiah, teacher, rebuke your disciples. They didn't like what they were saying. They didn't like that these people were actually praising the Messiah, all right? And he says back to them, I tell you, if these should be silent, the stones would immediately cry out. When he came near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, if you, even you, had known even today what things would bring you peace. He's saying, it's only me. It's only me. And the majority of you reject your own king. Our Messiah continues to speak. Pay attention. He says, but now they are hidden from your eyes. Now the truth of the true peace is hidden from those who reject him. Okay? That still stands. That's a truth that still stands. There will be no peace in the land over there until our Messiah comes. There is no Zion without the King of Zion. Okay? Period. Let's keep reading. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you and surround you and press you in on every side. Y'all, it is December 5th, 2023. Think about what has been happening the past few months and think about how things are escalating. Think about it. Let's keep reading. He says, they will dash you and your children within you to the ground. They will not leave one stone upon another within you because you did not know the time of your visitation. Do you hear the words of your Messiah? Do you hear what he is saying about the land? Do you hear what he is saying about those who reject him? Now match that up to current events. Now, at the end of chapter 19, we see that our Messiah goes into the house, right? And he's driving out the money changers. And we've read of these things before in Matthew and in Mark. As we open up to review chapter 20, you will see that we have already read of these things in Matthew and in Mark. And so it opens up with the question of Yeshua's authority, right? They wanted to know, in what authority does he do all these things? Like, why is he driving out the Pharisees and the scribes and these people in, high positions of power? Who does he think he is driving people out of the temple of, the temple of his father? And we've read about this in the past. And he says, look, I'll answer your question if you answer me a question. And we know what that question is. He asked the question about the baptism of John, right? He says, is it from men or is it from heaven? And they knew the answer, but their own hard hearts would not answer the truth because they didn't want to recognize the fact that they are hypocrites. They were fallen away. Then it covers the parable of the vineyard and the question of those who come and ask the Messiah, is it right for the people, the Yehudim, to pay taxes? And then he says, Tell me, whose face is on that denarii, right? And he says, render to Caesar, right? What belongs to Caesar, and render to Yah what belongs to Yah. Basically, he's saying, whose image is on you? Render to him what belongs to him. And then the Sadducees come and they ask the question about the resurrection. Now remember, Sadducees don't believe in resurrection, but the Pharisees do, right? You see the division within those of the body, right? The natural branches back then, that they weren't on one accord, as you see that there are, I don't know, hundreds of denominations within the body of Messiah now. There's nothing new under the sun, right? Nobody is in agreement 100%. But, right, resurrection is actually biblical, and the Sadducees did not believe. And so they came asking him a question, all right? But I want you to see how he answers. So he says at the very end of answering their question, for he is not the Elohim of the dead, but of the living, for to him all live, right? So he recorded Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and how he is the God of the living. So he's saying, although their bodies may be in the ground, their soul and their spirit are very much alive, because he is not the God of the dead. He's the God of the living. Let that speak to you. And so the Messiah asks them a question after they ask him all of these questions, and he gets them to be completely silent. After he asks the question, he says, look, how can the master, or how can the Messiah be the son of David? And David calls him Lord, right? And it silences them. They don't know how to answer. But he's trying to reveal to them spiritual things. He's trying to reveal to them who he is. He is their king. He is their Messiah, but they don't see it. At the end of chapter 20, he denounces the scribes, as it is recorded in Matthew and in Mark as well. Chapter 21 opens up with the widow's offering. Now, we've read of this before, but it's going to segue into some things when the Messiah is warning about the signs of the times of the very end. So let's open up reading from verse 1. It says, he looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts in the treasury. He also saw a poor widow putting in 2 mites. And he said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. For all of these things were out of their abundance, but for her, she is put in out of her poverty. That's me paraphrasing, right? I'm just summarizing so we can get to the meat and potatoes to close out chapter 21. And so, right, as they're walking out of the temple, let's pick up in verse 5. It says, as some spoke of how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts, he said, as for these things which you see, the days will come when not one stone shall be left on another that will not be thrown down. Now, the temple was destroyed, right? Some 40 years after our Messiah had resurrected from the dead, right? And the majority of those of the Yehudim had rejected their Messiah. But as he is telling them these things, that these beautiful things that you see will be torn down, right? Because the true temple is us, y'all. He doesn't want them to be impressed with those things, because those were just a prototype of what he's truly trying to build back up. And it is man, his image bearers. But nonetheless, there's a standing temple right then and there. So they're confused about what he's saying. They don't understand what he is saying at that moment in time. And so they said to him, teacher, when will all of these things be? And what will be the sign when these things will happen? And so we've read of some of the things that he said will happen, right? He says that beware, many will come in my name, and there will be wars and rumors of wars. And he says nation will rise against nation, but in the Greek, it really says ethnicities, right? So all of these people will rise against one another, earthquakes in various places. And he says there will be terrors and signs in the heavens. But let's pick up in verse 12. It says, but before all of these things, they will seize you. He's talking about his followers. They will seize the followers of Messiah. And he says they will persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. Now, verse 13 and on is the good part. He says, it will turn out as a testimony for you. Therefore, resolve in your hearts beforehand not to practice your defense. He says the Holy Spirit will come upon you and will speak, and this will be a testimony for you. Now, relate this to Revelation 14:12, right? The remnant are those who have the testimony of Yeshua and keep the commandments of the Father. That's the remnant, because there will only be a few who truly make it in to the narrow gate, the narrow path. But let's pick up in verse 15. Our Messiah says, "For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all of your opponents will be able to neither refute nor resist." Our Messiah says, during the time of persecution, and when they ask you to give an account, right, to defend yourself, when they want you to renounce and denounce your loyalty and your alliance with the king, he says, don't even worry what you're going to say. He says, in that moment, I will be with you. I will put the words in your mouth. That's what our Messiah says. All right. So he says, you will be betrayed by parents and brothers and relatives and friends. Is that not happening to you already? The true followers of Messiah will have their own family members turn against them. He says, and they will put some of you to death. That's just the truth of what's going to happen, y'all. So he says, you will be hated by all men for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head shall perish. In your endurance, you will gain your souls. He says, stand. Don't bend your knee. Stand. Stand for the king. Let's pick up in verse 20. He says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you will know that its desolation has drawn near. He's saying Jerusalem will be destroyed. That's what your Messiah is telling you. Jerusalem will be utterly destroyed in the very end. Let's keep reading, all right? Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are in the city depart, and let not those who are in the country enter the city. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Now, I've shared a video before, time and time again, but I'm going to share it again. Check the description box down below. Parable of the Vineyard. He has a video that will open your mind up and open your spirit up to receive the truth of what is going to happen to the land over there. All right? Please read Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 1 through 6, and then you will see what our Messiah is talking about. Then go to Revelation chapter 18 and read verses 19 through 20. And then when you're done with that, just mosey on over to Revelation chapter 18, verses 23 through 24. And then you will see what our Messiah is saying. I don't share these, connecting scriptures for fun. Please go and read. Check these things out so that you can understand what shall take place. Picking up in verse 23, our Messiah continues to speak. He says, but woe to those who are pregnant and to those who nurse in those days, for there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. Upon what people? The people who are over there in the land. Come on. These are the words of your Messiah. All right. He says, they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive to all of the nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are filled. Now, certainly this happened to those who lived there during the Roman occupation, right? Titus, during the time of Titus, he destroyed the second temple, and many Yehudim, right, were scattered once again. But this is a double reference prophecy. Please believe it, because our Messiah is talking about the time of the very end. Let's keep reading and pick up in verse 25. This is talking about the coming of the Son of Man. He's telling them all of the signs for his coming, his second coming, when he actually comes to set up the kingdom. He is giving them the clues. All right. He says, there will be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. Again, look at what the stars are, because the stars, as far as scripture is concerned, are the angelic beings, are the fallen ones. Don't believe me? Read Revelation chapter 1, verse 20, and then look it up in the Strongs and see what our Messiah is saying. He's talking about the fallen ones. Yeah, the angelic beings, the fallen ones who are not on his side anymore. And he says, and on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men fainting from fear in expectation of what is coming on the inhabitants of the earth. For the powers of heaven will be shaken. The powers of heaven, y'all, that's the wicked principalities, rulers of darkness, right? It says that the stars will be shaken, right? The angelic beings, the fallen ones, when our Messiah says, as in the days of Noah, what was happening during the days of Noah? The rebellious angels, the fallen ones, came and mated with the daughters of men. That was one of the signs of the days of Noah. Now I'm going to give you some other scriptures. I may just go and read from them so you can understand the totality of what is going to happen before our Messiah comes. Let's pause for a moment and go to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, and then I'm going to take you over to Revelation so you can understand and start connecting scripture, all right? It says right here, "How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations." Now I'm going to read from Revelation chapter 12, and I'm going to start reading from verse 7. Now you can read from verse 1 so that you can truly understand things, but I'm going to pick up in verse 7 so that this doesn't carry on too long. So it says, "Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought." There we go, angels, which are stars, okay? We need to know that. It says, "But they did not prevail, nor was there a place for them in heaven any longer." This is talking about the second heaven where there's wicked rulers and principalities dwell, right? The heavens will be shaken. The powers of the heavens will be shaken, so they won't have a place there anymore. Guess where they'll be? They'll be here. That's what it says. Let's keep reading. It says, "The great dragon was cast out, that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world." He deceives the whole world. All right. He says he was cast down to the earth and his angels were cast down with him. So guess what people are going to be seeing before our Messiah comes? Fallen ones here on the earth. Days of Noah. Our Messiah said, "as the days of Noah," and Revelation is making a case for it. And so did Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. Let's wake it up. All right, back to Luke chapter 21. Let's pick up in verse 27. It says, "Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with the power and great glory." So those things have to happen first before our Messiah comes back. All right. So I'm sorry for the pre-tribbers. Okay. I'm sorry for those who believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. Our Messiah is coming back one more time. There's not a secret coming and then he comes back again. He's only coming back one more time. All right. Let's pick up in verse 28. "When these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption is drawing near." Let's continue reading in verse 29. "He told them this parable." He says, "Look at the fig tree and all of the trees. When they are sprouting leaves already, you see and know for yourselves that summer is now near. So in like manner, when you see these things happening, you know that the kingdom of Elohim is near." When you see the earth and all of these tribulations, he says, look, the time is coming. The time is drawing close. Our Messiah is closer than you think, y'all. It says, "Truly I tell you, this generation, the generation that sees all of these things," he says, "will not pass away until all of these things are fulfilled. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away." He's saying, look, these things are going to happen. All right. The fallen angels, they're going to be here again. All of these crazy things, they're going to happen again. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And so he warns you. This is the stand that he tells you to take. He says, "Take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts become burdened with excessiveness and drunkenness and anxieties of life." He says, look, don't deal with, the truth of this thing like the nations do, like the outsiders do. Don't resort to drunkenness. Don't resort to these things. He says, look, I have told you these things beforehand so that you will not be scared. Do not walk in fear. He warns you. He warns you about that, right? Because if you resort to drunkenness and anxieties of life, he says that day will come upon you unexpectedly, right? If you fall away and you don't watch anymore, you don't stand and take watch on the wall. He says, oh, the day of his coming will then come unexpectedly for you if you fall away, all right? He says, "For as a snare it will come on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Therefore watch always and pray that you may be counted worthy to escape all of these things which will happen and stand before the Son of Man." He says, pray. Pray that you will be counted worthy to escape these things. Now, if you go back to Revelation chapter 12 and start reading from the beginning and not verse 7, you will see that there are a people, and it's possibly the 144,000 that gets hidden away for 3.5 years, right? And they're taken care of, right? And the enemy can't get to them, right? And it's only the remnant. It's those who have the testimony of Yeshua and keep the commandments of the Father. Those are the ones who would be qualified to be the 144,000 and the great multitude. So please keep that in mind, right? Because that's possibly what our Messiah is talking about. Pray that you may be counted worthy to escape the troubles, because there are some who are going to be sealed. They're going to have the seal of the Father, and the enemy and all of his wickedness and all of his, generals, they're not going to have any power against the ones who are sealed. Make yourself ready so that you may be counted worthy to be one of those in that number. Deep and Word family, that's all that I have for you today. Until tomorrow, Yah bless.